Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Net Support Radio. I'm your host for today, Maggie Layfield, the Vice President of Sales at Net Support and a former K-12 educator, specifically ninth grade. We have the excellent pleasure of having some rock stars from the EdTech world joining us today for our podcast to chat a little bit about the future of EdTech, what's coming up, how we can get past the last couple of years and what we've been through, and really ways to just make things better for your classroom and for your school. So let me introduce our champions today. First up, Dr. Adam File. He is the Director of Technology and Media Services at Newton County Schools, a newly elected ISTE Board of Director, and a former science teacher. He's also, fun fact, a top K-12 IT influencer, courtesy of EdTech magazine. Hey, Adam, thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me here. I guess I made the short list. I'm not sure how I got on here, but thank you for having me a part of this panel this morning.
Well, to be honest, your name alphabetically came up first, so it kind of... No, I'm just kidding.
That happens all the time. You know, people have their names in there by a first name. I'm Adam. I'm the butt dial. That's me. I get it all the time.
First one in the list. So, well, we did the first and the last because we're gonna bump back over here on the other side to Dr. Rosalind Washington. She's a digital learning specialist for literacy at Atlanta Public Schools in my backyard, former classroom teacher, and she's an adjunct professor at Georgia State University. She's also Google and Microsoft certified, so clearly has some awesome creds behind her. Rosalind, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. And I was going to say W's are usually chosen last, so I'm just glad to be here.
We try to cover the whole spectrum here with Net Support. I want to get someone from either side, but and then right from the middle, last but not least, Al Kingsley, the head of Net Support and also the head of 2 multi-academy trusts. For those in the U.S., that's what they call districts over across the pond in the U.K. He is the author of My Secret EdTech Diary and the co-author of A Guide to Creating a School Digital Strategy. Hey, Al.
Hello, and well, I'm Al, so you can guess how I got selected. I was on the list with Adam. Good to be here. Looking forward to the chat.
Yeah.
Excellent. We're so glad to have you guys today. You all bring together a really diverse background experience, both in curriculum and your experience in schools as administrators and teachers, but also just your knowledge of EdTech and what it brings to the table. Not to bring up the dreaded C word, COVID, but many of our schools found themselves really unexpectedly embarking on their own sort of one-on-one adventure in the last few years, some of them by choice, some of them not so much. And there was little planning or preparation that could take place. So Adam, one of your areas of expertise is in implementing one-to-one tech initiatives in schools. And so for those schools that maybe are struggling to turn things around, got off on the wrong foot, just trying to fill the gap that was there or trying to make the best of a bad situation, what advice would you give them to help them turn things around and make things better for their school?
The biggest thing is forget everything that you read prior to the pandemic. Because the problem with a lot of one-to-one initiatives that we were forced into due to the pandemic, you didn't have the front-end planning that most districts talk about when you have a one-to-one initiative. Normally, this is like a multi-year process where you have different devices, you have panels that come in, people say, oh, I like this one, I like this one. You have your asset manager in place and all that fun stuff. Because ultimately, I've always told people a one-to-one initiative is easy. When you just talk about it one-to-one, it's a math problem. How many students do you have? How many devices? Added another 5 to 10% over, done, one-to-one. But if you're only talking about the devices, the biggest feature of a one-to-one is the learning that has to take place. It's a shift in how teaching and learning happens in your space, because now it really turns into that anytime, any place learning. So that's the thing that I really, when I'm working with districts, I tell them, look at your classroom. Now your 4 walls are no longer your 4 walls. Any place that the kids have access, they can learn. So whether it's on their buses, whether it's in the gym, whether it is in the classrooms, in the hallways, really look at transforming your spaces to allow learning to happen organically throughout your buildings. And really this year, especially with the everybody having devices, actually in the states we have an influx of devices with the different federal funding that we've had. You have the flexibility to make mistakes, to fail. And that's really what it's all about right now, because this pandemic has given us the opportunity to shift the way we think, because we've always been so attuned to we have to get it right the first time. Everything has to work exactly right. You know what? It doesn't necessarily have to work the way we want it to, but we need to learn from those mistakes and modify. And we can't try to make it fit what happened prior to the pandemic. And I think that's where a lot of districts are missing the boat when they're trying to make their one-to-one initiatives, all these technology, all these devices fit to what teaching and learning looked like in 2019. And we can't do that, or you're going to be set yourself up for failure.
That is excellent advice. And like you said, the modern classroom, it's not a classroom anymore. It's physically anywhere a kid can be, learning can take place, which is an amazing feat. But like you said, it's not 3 years ago. We can't start keeping like thinking like we're in, the 2010s. This is the 2020s. It's a brand new decade, brand new world, people. So I love that advice. And I think it's so true that schools sometimes have to fail through it in order to get to the learning, get to where they actually want to be, and not be afraid to kind of dig themselves out of failure, which is, I think, where a lot of people were in the last couple of years too. And you hit on something that's really key. Normally in a one-to-one initiative, you got that time, right? You got that couple of years of planning. You mentioned, bringing the asset manager, all those key stakeholders to be able to plan, but people weren't able to do that. So Al, your expertise area is in digital strategy and actually planning for the future. So what can schools do right now to be able to future-proof themselves for whatever this decade is going to throw at us next, and really develop a solid digital strategy for their schools?
How long have we got, Maggie? A couple of hours. We should really cover that. I mean, the first thing, Adam's spot on. Sometimes you kind of have to forget what's happened before. And the thing that I've always said has been one of the most positives of the last 18 months, and there haven't been many, which kind of links to what Adam was saying, was very much around the fact that actually schools and teachers were empowered to take risks, try stuff. And actually, if you don't try stuff, you never innovate. And one of the things we've seen is that acceleration of being empowered to try things. Not everything will work, but, as I sometimes say, and many others do, failures are stepping stones to success. You've got to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And then that links into our, the educator mindset of reflective practice, actually quite capable of figuring out what didn't work. It's when people feel that there's some kind of judgment, if you risk trying something, that actually prevents that moving forward. In terms of what we're seeing across schools and around the world in terms of how we kind of bring digital strategy forward, actually lots of it isn't really about the particular product or technology. It's much more about, first and foremost, rather than top-down deciding on an approach and then just communicating here's what we're going to be doing as a district or a school. It's much more about starting that dialogue to make sure that all the stakeholders have a voice. And at the heart of that, it's obviously teachers and students understanding where technology can have a positive impact in the learning experience and help nurture. And of course, every school and cohort will be different. Different learners will engage in different ways or may have different challenges in terms of how technology might facilitate their teaching and learning. And then around that, we've got all those kind of stakeholders. The senior leadership want to align it with the school's development plan. What are our main priorities and pressures and challenges that we want to try and mitigate this year? Sometimes schools start with the finance team. We've got this budget, what we're going to get, which actually to me is the last part of the junction. The finance team should dictate the speed of the journey, not the journey you take. So then we want to be looping in and having that conversation with the data and IT team, making sure that we've got the right infrastructure and foundation, so they're part of that discussion. Data privacy is always going to be up there, thinking about the implications of the things we try online and what that might mean. We've got to think about our children who have special educational needs, that accessibility and inclusivity of where possible of the technology we bring in place. We've got to think about CEPA and our online safety and making sure that any of the tools that we broaden that gamut of options, we do so with that mindfulness of trying to keep our learners safe online. Sometimes that's actually about thinking about empowering our learners to make the right choices as digital citizens. And then there might be across our school, district, trust, wherever we are in the world, that overarching governance that will provide challenge. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And how will we know if it's done well? How are we going to measure the impact? And the reason why I think that jumps up the list is because some schools measure success when it comes to a digital strategy with how much you've achieved, which is foolish. What's really the measure is how do we know what we've done has worked well? So sometimes less is more. It's really that mindset of if we can measure the success, even if it's small steps in the way that we more effectively use technology to help support teaching and learning, then we're much more likely to be confident to do more of it, because confidence is key. And I kind of talked like a virtual Venn diagram there, Maggie, but the one that's also sits around all of that, and I think lots of schools just weren't doing enough of, was PD. Actually, the professional development that gives the confidence for those users, the staff, to actually utilize technology as part of the teaching and learning experience. And often that's just been too little, too late, rather than interwoven, embedded on a continuous basis. So those are kind of the key things in terms of who to get involved, so that when we then take a digital strategy forward, it's not the leadership's vision and you'll have to figure out along the journey why they're doing it. It's our vision collectively as a school. We've all had a voice and stakeholders. And any project, not just education, if everybody feels part of the journey, you've probably got a better chance of success.
That's excellent. And hopefully that gives schools a really good picture of, how they can start planning to move forward and what they need to look at. Just follow the 10 bullet points you've laid out, and they'll be able to get there. Like Adam said, one-to-one is easy. One device, one student. It's the rest of the stuff that you've really got to kind of align up there. But I totally agree that you really need to get people's buy-in at every level. People need to understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, and feel like they're a part of it in order to really own the journey and actually want to participate in it. And you brought up a key area, which has become more and more kind of a talking point for everyone in EdTech, and not just that, but in the corporate world and outside as well. And that's that kind of sticky area of technology of balancing student data privacy, but also the school's responsibility to protect the students that they have under their care and to look after their well-being. We want to follow these rules and regulations. We've got policies with CIPA and things we have to be compliant with, but we also don't want to tiptoe over the line and kind of go the opposite direction. So Rosalind, from your experience, with what you've been working with over the last few years, what are some strategies or approaches to internet safety that you feel are most effective in schools?
Okay. Well, to piggyback on what Al and Adam have talked about, it's really best if we begin at the beginning. However, we're kind of in media res. We're kind of in the middle of the action right now, aren't we? And so we just have to do the best we can. Ideally, we begin talks about digital citizenship and internet safety before going one-to-one. However, the pandemic didn't allow for some of that. So now we just begin where we are. And frankly, if done correctly, it's never too late to make a strong start to internet safety and digital citizenship. And we have to focus on the possibilities that the internet and all of our digital lives allow, rather than focusing on the risks for students. We know that students will tune us out with a lot of negativity. So instead, talk about all the possibilities and the things that that they can do, and that all of that comes with a certain responsibility. And as digital citizens, they need to conduct themselves a certain way. But that responsibility doesn't just end with the student. We as educators have an equal responsibility to model at all times responsible behavior. So we can talk about that. We can focus on the meta level and the micro level. Talk about passwords. Talk about navigating safely. Talk about conducting yourselves or staying away from the comment section on certain pages. All of those things are really student-centered. Okay, so if we start with some student-centered approaches, and again, talk about their responsibilities. And really, once we begin broaching some of these, allow students some opportunity to dialogue and discuss and react to some of this and talk about what they've seen, where they've been, because we know students are not blank slates. They're not empty vessels. They come with a world of knowledge already, even our earliest and our youngest learners. So again, allow it to be student-centered, give them an opportunity to dialogue and discuss. And frankly, be consistent with it. So internet safety doesn't involve that one lesson at the beginning of the year about, bullying and how to conduct ourselves online, and then it never comes back up. So it needs to be a consistent conversation, and we need to have realistic expectations of students and the things they're capable of and what they're going to do and the boundaries that they're going to test. And then we need to be ready to support that in their learning, because what we're defining as internet safety is really a set of behaviors. And so as educators, we know that students will learn a set of behaviors at a different pace, right? Or that, we should have certain expectations that everyone's not going to react the same. And so we just need to be consistent and have realistic expectations, and really also vary the modes by which we deliver these. Everything can't be discussion. Involve some fantastic video, involve some songs, involve some books, invite some speakers. And so vary the modes so that students who are receiving this information consistently can have an opportunity to access it. Because we know that's our role as educators, right? Everything can't be Googled. Some things can't be Googled. And so that's what we're here for. We're here to keep the adventure in. We're here to make learning accessible. So we're here to keep the action in. And again, we want to focus on those things which are possible instead of just the risks of that the digital world represents.
I love that. And I think too often kids hear no. I tell my toddlers all the time, no, don't touch that. No, you'll burn your hands. And of course, they want to then do all the things you tell them no. But highlighting the positive is so key, that they understand there is a world of information out there. There's a world of resources. It's just knowing where to go, getting the right stuff, and not putting yourself at risk. So giving them some ownership and responsibility,
yes,
which, especially the older kids love. I can do it by myself. That's my 3-year-old,
And Maggie,
well, then,
if I can add that, and one thing I think is very important with that internet safety, we as adults can't project our fears onto the kids. Because we're teaching a lot of this stuff as the plane is flying or building the ship while it's in the ocean. But we also have to think about it. Technology is constantly changing. So even whatever we taught, if we started quote unquote at the beginning, that may be outdated based on how technology has changed and access that we've given information. 'Cause at one point, if I told you that I wanted you to bug your house, you'd be like, what am I talking about? Yeah, I want you to put a recording device in all your rooms of your house, and let people have access to it. You look at me like I'm crazy. But we do that right now with these little things called, and I'm not going to say its name because it's sitting right here on my desk. Um, but it's that company that we order all our stuff from. But I have one of these in all my rooms now, and we have conversations around it. But at one point, internet safety, we would tell people don't do that. But now it's ubiquitous with a lot of households and our cellular devices. So we have to think about it's evolving and changing, and we can't project our fears of where it's going onto our kids. It's really making them aware of where it could go and empower them to question the people that are pushing this out, because it's their data, to Al's point earlier, it's in our families, but they need to be sure that they are equipped with the tools to ask the questions they need to say whether or not we need to go down these technology pathways.
No, that's really. Oh, go ahead, Rita. Go ahead.
And I was going to say, I like that. I like the idea of not projecting onto students, allowing them to have their own lives, their own understanding, their own experiences. And then again, when we give them opportunities to dialogue about that, we'll see that it may diverge from our way of thinking and our understanding. I love that.
And you both have brought up kind of there's two kind of sets to this. There's teaching the students, helping them to understand, but it's also the school's responsibility. There's some aspects that us as adults that we're responsible to. And Adam, you brought it up as well, that you should know what you're getting your kids into. If you're bringing something on board, if you're adopting a new technology, you as a school, as an educator, you should have the foresight to look into what are the implications, how could this be a risk, how could this be a reward, so that we know going in what the potential is. And I think a lot of administrators and educators should be asking some really important questions on the front end before they just dive right in and jump on the latest trend or the newest tech or whatever's out there. Are there some questions that you think that people should be asking when they evaluate technology that's going to help them to better select the right tools and to make sure that they're not putting the students at risk, that they're kind of walking that tightrope in a way that's beneficial for both sides?
Yeah, and with that, I'm going to take it in two different directions on that one. One is when you are looking at adopting tools and resources. I always tell people if you don't know why, don't buy. If you're just buying something because you have money, here in the states we're doing all this talk about quote unquote learning loss, and I know I'm yet to meet an educator who likes that phrase learning loss, but it's something for the outside education people to understand, just like we use the term homework gap. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about internet connectivity at home, but everybody understands homework and there's a gap. So we're going to run with that. So this whole learning loss thing, a lot of people are buying these various tools, and I'm not bashing tools. They're great. But if that's the only reason you're buying it because you have the money and you think there's a gap in learning or quote unquote learning loss, we need to buy this stuff, whether it's your iExcel, iStation, iRead, iMath, love this, love that. We need to calm down on buying all these tools if we don't know why we're buying these things. If there's really a way to meet the needs of all students, which takes me to my other point, your products that you're buying need to be inclusive of the students that you have the privilege to instruct. And that's one thing that I've been very animate on in the tools that we've been purchasing in our district. Are they culturally sensitive? Are our students seeing themselves in these platforms and in these products? Because we have decision makers or people who are creating these tools that don't look like our students, who haven't experienced what our students have experienced. One of the things that we also have to keep in mind, yes, we are in going on year two now of this whole pandemic, but also during this pandemic we had some kind of racial cultural awakening in the U.S. across multiple states. We had some things happen in Atlanta, in our backyard here. So all these states have seen these things that have occurred. We also had a whole uprising around our election process this past year, and we're about to get an election process in November. So all these things that are happening in the world are things that should be reflected in our tools that we're purchasing, because we cannot teach kids standards if we're lying to them about what's happening around them, because it has to be relevant. It's like you can't teach me a standard if you're not understanding what I'm dealing with outside of my classroom. And as a teacher, I can't teach a standard if I'm dealing with all these things that are happening around us. So we have to look at these things that are relevant to our students, that are relevant to our world, that are taking that social emotional learning aspect in place. So these new questions we need to be asking vendors as they are creating these products. Okay, let's see your staff as you're creating this. Who wrote this? There's a bunch of men sitting in a room that created it. I mean, let's see what your educators look like that help write this, that audited your product. Are you revising it as you're seeing things? Do teachers or students have the ability to question and say, "Hey, I know what you're asking here on this question, but it could come across sounding this way versus this way." Is there a process in place to revisit and revise some of these tools? So those are things that, as a district, excuse me, we need to be asking a vendor to see their tools and what is their revision process, and can we submit questions. And it has to be a partnership or relationship. We can't just take what they give us, and I think sometimes districts do that. We listen to the bigger districts. If a big district bought it, then we have to get it too, versus having the understanding we have power and we have voice, and holding all of these vendors accountable for their products, that it better reflects who we get the privilege and honor to teach each and every day.
100%. And I think we get a lot of buzzwords in education, like you said, learning loss, homework gap, and two of the ones I hope don't go away are going to be diversity and inclusion. I think it's so important that, like you said, students still see themselves represented in what's in front of them, that they feel like they're understood, that a student's voice is a big deal. Being able to feel like you can speak up, and just understanding that not every student speaks the same way or has the same way of expressing themselves, and giving them different resources to amplify that is so crucial to helping them feel like they're a part of something, and really connecting to that social emotional learning. And Rosalind, I saw you nodding your head there a little bit too. I feel like Adam was hitting on some key spots for you as well.
Yes. And I like this notion of intentionality. You know what I mean? Using technology with intentionality and purchasing it with intentionality, rather than we've got to fill a hole. There's a hole now. Let's fill it up with technology, because technology cannot be a cure-all. It's not a magic serum. It's not the magic sauce. If it were a cure-all, a magic sauce, a magic serum, everything would be cured. because we've got enough technology. And I like to remind people that less is often more. I don't remember who said it. Was it you, Maggie? Or was it who said less is more? Was it Al? Al? And so I remind people that somewhere, someone is doing more with less technology than you have. If I can tell a quick story, I shadowed one of our EdTech specialists one day, and he was doing like a mystery Skype, that mystery Skype thing with the school up in Washington, and had to be on a Wednesday. And they couldn't make it that Wednesday, so it had to be the next Wednesday. And I was like, why do they have to do it on a Wednesday? Anyone want to take a guess as to why it had to be on a Wednesday? Yeah? No? Okay.
I got nothing.
Because that's the day that the school bus pulled up with the wireless internet for them, for this school in mountainous, rural, isolated Washington state. But on that Wednesday, they were making magic happen. That's not to say they didn't have internet the other days, but it was plugged in. And you and I know the difference between hardwired internet and Wi-Fi. So imagine if we only had Wi-Fi one day a week. But they are doing more with that one day than many schools are doing with what they have. So again, somewhere somebody's doing more with less than you have. So we have to be just intentional rather than trying to fill gaps and fill holes with tech.
Absolutely. Scarcity often is the kind of the source of a lot of creativity. When you don't have enough, you make it work, and you make it work well. And I love that they had one day and they were going to use that day to the best of their advantage, which a lot of us just take for granted, the fact that I can connect up and I have easy access and that's it. And we don't think about what would we do if we only had that limited time or limited access to resources.
Exactly.
Absolutely. And Al, kind of you mentioned in the beginning, you have a very unique perspective. You wear two hats. So you're an education administrator, you're the head of two multi-academy trusts, but you're also the head of an EdTech company. So having straddled both sides of the field, as it were, what kind of insight can you provide on selecting the right technology and how you can pick the right tools that actually are going to have an impact, especially for schools that maybe have limited budgets or have restrictions as to what they can access?
It's a really interesting challenge. I mean, it's really, for me, it's lovely listening to Rosalind and Adam sharing their perspectives, and of course they resonate so heavily with what we're seeing across schools everywhere. I mean, the one thing that I might not critique but kind of redefine is, I agree with Rosalind. In many cases, we've got enough tech. It's just sometimes we haven't got the right tech, and that's because in the past we've made decisions to follow everybody else. And so the first thing I always say, which I think both have identified, is no two schools are the same, no two districts are the same. It's down to the cohort of your students and your staff as to what technology and what solutions will be most relevant. I think after that, if you look at the kind of, for want of a better term, the rubrics that a school should be following or a district follows when they're looking at adopting technology, there's kind of two strands. There's the techie strand, and then there's the pedagogical, the curriculum strand, depending on the types of tools that schools are looking at. So the techie strand is that bit about, well, actually the best practice is to look at what you've got already and actually assess whether you're getting the most out of it, because sometimes you don't need to buy more kit. You need to redeploy or revisit the way that you use your existing technology. But if you're looking at new tech, the first thing is, does it actually work with the infrastructure and the devices you've already got? There's plenty of schools that spent lots of budgets buying kit and didn't think about the Wi-Fi and the infrastructure, and then realized they couldn't leverage the full benefits. That's probably more anecdotal now than reality as we see moving forwards. But there's lots of time when we don't think that actually the cost of the kit is just one part of the jigsaw puzzle to get the most out of it. Then there's the case of, after the infrastructure, that we have to think about, will that kit, is it sufficiently agnostic? In other words, when we're buying software to go that technology, we don't necessarily want to be locked down to one platform. It might restrict the way that we want to develop our IT infrastructure in the years ahead. So I think schools are getting savvy now to recognizing they want solutions that give them the flexibility to make choices in the future. And then with software, there's all the kind of the things that Rosalind shared about school data privacy, understanding what data is stored, where it's stored, who has access to it, and for how long. And there's also the things that save administrative time. Does it, link up with a rostering system so that we haven't got to duplicate or triplicate the kind of information we've got? If we flip away from the, It's the nuts and bolts of tech. So it's a bit of software that's got curriculum content that aligns with our standards, what we're doing. One is, does that software align with what we're trying to teach? Does it duplicate, or does it add alongside existing solutions we've got? Many schools buy new tech without realizing that existing products they're often paying subscriptions for will do something similar. So there's some cost savings to be had. And it's making sure that you can evaluate its instructional value. The thing that's really, I guess, come to the fore and resonated in the last, particularly the last year, but over the last couple of years, has been moving that mindset to evidence-informed selection, choosing products based on where's the numbers to back up when you say this shiny product will be amazing in our school. Says who? Where are the case studies? Where's the independent research if it's from a pedagogical perspective? Show me the information before, as a school or district, we spend our time trying the product. And then when you do, make sure that the solution you can evaluate, so you can do a compare or contrast to make sure that you're actually satisfied it's delivering for your cohort. And then after that, it comes down to the selection process. I think some of the feedback we've heard today is really important to make sure if it's content, that it's relevant and it's appropriate and it's engaging for your students and cohort. I always say, and I guess I would do, being, part of my time being an EdTech vendor, but actually the truth of it is that's why Netsport had been in business 30 years. It used to be that a vendor would engage with a school, sell some software, the transaction concludes and you walk away. In reality, the only successful ones are the ones that co-produce. So actually develop the solutions with educators, with communities, evolve the solution, as Adam alluded to, in terms of that constant update, refresh of the technology to make sure it remains current and relevant, and maintain a relationship with the school. It's a two-way symbiotic relationship if you want to be successful. That's why there's so many tech products that appear for a few years and then go again versus the long-standing, is that sense of you have to think of it as being a relationship. And it's not something that a vendor should be doing out of goodwill. The best vendors learn far more by that relationship with schools and educators than they share the other way. It absolutely is key to having evidence-informed products. Customer knows best, and never is that a truer thing. So I think there's a kind of a following line there, Maggie, that you would follow through as part of that selection process.
No, 100%. And I think that kind of the key thing I'm hearing from everybody, and I think we'd all agree that schools have a lot more power than I think a lot of times they think they do. And it's not like a grocery store where you walk in and you have to grab the box off the shelf and like, oh, I guess those are the ingredients. This is what I'm stuck with. Like, if you work with people, if you talk to vendors, you want people who are going to evolve it. Like Adam said, they're going to change with the times. They're going to look at how they're producing, what they're producing, and making sure that it's actually relevant and that they're not stuck in the past just doing what they've always done or not really making it appropriate for today and what's happening in the world around us. So I think it's probably crucial. I think you all agree that, when you're working with vendors, to take the time to actually say, this is what we want, and just see if you can get something out of it. Don't just sit there and be like, oh, I guess this is all we got. Tick the boxes and go. But, you tell them what you want and see what you can get from it.
I mean, that's the one crazy thing in education that I always find. In other businesses, the customers have the power. They're like, hey, it's supply and demand. The free market, as we say we should be able to drive the market versus the market telling us this is what we have, use it. Prime example is when everybody had to go virtual, and when we looked at finding some kind of virtual curriculum to teach, there were 2 or 3 vendors out there that had platforms and products, and they've been out for a while, and none of them were really that great. They were okay, but they weren't great. Nobody was like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing. We need to shut down schools and just teach this way because this platform is so amazing. It was what it was, and we were like, okay, well, this is what we got. We got to use it. And we found that we were doing a lot of work on the back end, making those platforms work for our students, filling in the gaps that existed. And I still don't know if any of those platforms have really made the adjustment that they needed to make moving forward. So, I mean, those are just those opportunities, as we were saying earlier, that now that we're in this new space moving forward, we need better tools to meet the new need that we have, this new I'm not gonna say problem, these new opportunities that we have for teaching and learning, we really need to push our vendors and our educators, our districts to demand better and do better for not only our students, but our teachers and our parents.
Rosalind, I see the finger coming up.
If I could just piggyback on what Al and Adam were saying, we have also implemented a ton of resources. And sometimes we do forget or do take the time to evaluate some things before, but we do quite a bit of evaluating after. And that's when we can look at our data on usage. We can look at our data of effectiveness. And if it's not being used, stop and let's ask our teachers, go boots on the ground and figure out why. And, to piggyback on what Adam said earlier, as we are working with it, it's okay for us to say, is this relevant? Is this relevant for our students? Has it empowered our teachers and our students to do what we hoped it would? Because, times change in an instant. And I don't think any of us 2 or 3 years ago could have seen this wave, come through, because technology, we know that it affords many opportunities, and one of the opportunities that it should afford is empowering teachers and students and allowing students to feel seen and heard every single day. And so we need to stop and evaluate. And if it's not right for your population, if it does not reflect the world that we are in, because we're preparing our students for their futures, their lives, not ours. Again, talking about projecting onto kids, we're preparing them for a very diverse world that we are not prepared for. I don't think any of our jobs existed when we were in high school, let alone elementary school. So let's stop and ask, is the tech that we purchased doing what we hoped it would do? Is it being used? Is it user friendly? Is it effective? Is it relevant? It's not too late in the middle.
It's not. And I love those points. And it's like, we've talked about failure this whole time and not being afraid to fail. And I think so many times we're like, well, we bought this. We've got to stick with it. We got to keep going. And at some point, right, you can evaluate and say, nope, not working. Gotta move on, And to Adam's point, you talk to the vendor. You can ask questions. If it's not working, is it something that can be fixed, or is it a PD related thing? Do we need to do more training? Do we need to do more to help teachers adopt it? But I think with 3 of us having been former educators, we were taught to self-assess. You finish the lesson, and before the next one, what could I have done better? How can I improve this for the next class? We are constantly evaluating ourselves and our performance. We should be doing the same thing with our EdTech to make sure that it's effective and it's constantly meeting those needs, and not just putting it on autopilot and hoping that it gets us where we want to be at the end of the school year.
Exactly.
Now, of course, we are a big group of ed techies, and we all love our ed tech, but I think it's important to advocate that the more and more tech we get in the classroom, there are some times where we need to step away from technology. We need to kind of back up a little bit and unplug, as it was. So, Rosalind, for your teachers, and you're working with them, obviously you're doing a lot with the digital piece and different ways they can incorporate it in the classroom, but what do you recommend to your teachers when it comes to balancing time on tech with actual unplugged learning time? What should that really look like in a classroom?
I don't think we can use the phrase intentionality too much. Right? So we need to be intentional with why we are using technology. I think Adam spoke to that earlier. As teachers, we know that balance is needed. That's when we stop and we break our groups up and we let them go into dialogue, or we stop and we do a walk around the classroom, or we do all of these things in the name of balance and refreshing. Well, we shouldn't lose that mindset when it comes to technology. Okay. So we need to balance high tech and low tech. That's one of my favorite phrases, is balancing high tech and low tech. So in the same way that we use virtual manipulatives, it's also very appropriate to put our kids in groups, use physical manipulatives where they'll get a chance to discuss, dialogue, debate, and see things in a physical way. Again, varying those modes of learning. The same way that we would use a virtual whiteboard, break out those Home Depot whiteboards we all bought back in the day, right? Where we had, do y'all remember, thumbs up if y'all remember that, going to Home Depot, getting that whiteboard and breaking it up, break those out, put those in groups. So then you have collaboration in real time, but it's person to person, because what we also want is we want to give our students an opportunity to practice some of those social skills, interpersonal skills, develop some intrapersonal skills, all of which can't be done on one side of the screen. So this again is an opportunity for them to brainstorm, dialogue, discuss. That's what balancing high tech and low tech is about. And We've all been in the classroom when the Wi-Fi got a little quirky. We've all been in the classroom the day after the storm and some things need to be rebooted. So if you are prepared for low tech opportunities, then you can just put that in place. There's still something to be said about a sloppy copy, right, Maggie, on paper. Do your sloppy copy on paper of that essay, and then you do your neat sheet. You just transfer your neat sheet to the Google Doc or to the Microsoft Word. So I think that teachers understand the idea of balance in so many areas. Let's not discard that when it comes to technology as well.
I think those are really great points. I think as teachers too, you get this performance anxiety of everything has to go right. I have to do this perfectly. I'm being watched all the time, and so they tend to want the neat sheet, not the sloppy. They want the sloppy copy. Yeah. They want the final product looks really good, and they pressure themselves too much. And then when things go wrong, they don't have that backup of the old school way of doing
yes.
things in the classroom.
So. Yes.
Well, we've all seen last couple of years the stressors that our teachers have faced, our students have faced, the anxiety over technology of having to flip-flop and do everything virtually and then coming back into the classroom. And many kids, especially the younger generations, they may have not been in a classroom. They spent the last 1 or 2 years online and never physically saw people or met people the way that we normally used to. So we got a huge wave of not only, a revolution with EdTech, but also understanding students' mental health, teachers' mental health, their well-being of both teachers and students. And the teacher burnout is a very real thing. We're losing a lot of teachers. We're seeing kids tapping out and not being emotionally connected or wanting to be part of school. So we've asked a lot of both of our teachers and our educators over the last 24 months with all this pivoting, the popular word of today, the pivot of today. So the big pivot. Oh no, friends, the couch at the stairs. But little did Ross know that meme would become a new thing for a new generation as of 2020. But we want to look at, as we kind of round up this discussion today, what can we do as administrators, as EdTech centers, as educators? What can we do moving forward to better help our teachers, our students, and our staff just overall prioritize their well-being, to disconnect from technology if they're getting too burned out, or to redirect and kind of change the efforts in order to help them cope with this strange new normal that we live in. And I'll let Adam go first. I think he's got a lot to say.
Kind of going to Rosalind's point earlier about that unplugging piece, that's important. I know for me personally, everyone I think now has worked at home to some level. So I know for me, I'm in my home office right now, and my kids know when daddy's in his office, that's my work time. But when I'm out of my office, you got me. So I don't bring my laptop out of here. I try not to bring my cell phone when we're sitting on the couch and stuff. So having that separation of work time, my workspace, and my family, my lifetime. Because one thing I noticed during the pandemic when we initially shut down, I saw people actually in my neighborhood. I have a window out here, and I was seeing people walking with their families that I didn't realize existed. I'm like, huh, where do they live? But people, like, it got us out of our norm because literally we were waking up, going to work, doing our work thing, picking kids up, practices, this, that, and the third. I see my wife give her a high five, and then next thing you know, we do the whole thing again. I mean, that was our rotation. It was wash, rinse, repeat. But the pandemic was a hard reset, and it got everybody to realize there's more in 24 hours that you can possibly do. But I think what we've been trying to do now that we're kind of back in person is force everybody back to that old way, going back to what I was saying earlier. And people are like, yeah, I don't want to go back to that. And so that's why we're also seeing some people stressed out, because they do realize there's more to life than working and washing and repeating. So we have to have those times to celebrate people, unplug, and do some of the things. Right before our winter break, with my department, we had I told them we were going to unplug, unwind, and spend time. And so our faculty meeting, we kind of made our version of Squid Games. Don't worry, they got eliminated, but everybody returned to work the next day. We did a series of various games, but they were unplugged. I mean, we did like EdTech Pictionary, where we had the flip chart and they were drawing up there. They were our red light, green light. They were answering questions as teams, and if they got it right, they got to move up a couple of steps to get closer to the stage. When they got it wrong, we shot them with some Nerf bullets. I mean, it was totally fun, but I mean, they got out of the whole like stress of people had to be quarantined and all the extra work and all this stuff, and they laughed. People laughed, and that's one thing I've always I try to say I'm the most non-director tech director you want to meet. I try to have fun. I joke. I play with my team. I mean, our thing is we have fun, but we get the job done. So it's all about that piece of making sure people are happy, because if they're happy, they won't mind some of the pivoting, some of the extra work. Yes, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, enough's enough, but you have to enjoy where you are and who you're with. So this is serious business we're dealing with right now. I mean, just like everyone else, we've lost members of our teachers, our administrators. I mean, we've had people die in the past 2 years due to COVID. So this stuff's real. We've had students that have lost family members due to COVID. So yes, it is bad. It can be depressing, but you have to find those moments to laugh, enjoy who you're with, the time you're together, because if not, it will be, oh my gosh, another faculty meeting. Oh my gosh, another PL I got to sit in. Oh my gosh, another tech tool they want us to learn. If you don't have fun in your job, in your workplace, then all that stuff piles up and it gets to the point where people want to walk away and not come back. So that's my little 2 cents on that. You got to enjoy where you are and who you're with, because you spend more time with your work family at times than you do with your real family. So you definitely got to enjoy what you do and who you're doing it with.
You heard it here first, folks. EdTech Squid Games coming soon to Netflix near you. No, I love that.
That may be my new FETC session for next year.
Oh my God. I will sit it on the front row as long as you don't ask me to bring chop my Nerf guns. Rosalind, talk to me about how we make this work going forward. What do we need to do?
Well, as Adam said, a lot of people are rejecting the norms that we had in the past. And I think that's what we're seeing with America's Great Recession. You know what I mean? People are saying, I don't want to do this. I don't want to live under this level of stress. I want to follow a dream. Unfortunately, we're also seeing some of that seep into education because of the level of stress that we have lived under for the last 2 years. So I think those of us that are here, I think we need to just find balance between work and home, as well as be transparent. And I think we need to focus on that we're all people. We are not computers. We work with computers. We are not computers. You can't turn us off at the end of the night. And we carry so much of this from day to day. So let's be transparent about, our real lives. I think another idea is to have reasonable expectations of each other. What's really going to happen in a 5-day work week, what people are really going to do after work, what they're really going to do on the weekends. And I think that our organization has been really good about making people aware of resources that they have access to. So I know that many school systems have put things in place to help teachers, to help students, to help employees. And I think Adam talked a little bit about that. I can't remember who was talking about the mental health crisis that we're in. And so because the work that we do is noble work as educators, we've been conditioned to put ourselves last. And we have. We've done that quietly because the work that we do is noble work. But we absolutely must seek out the resources. We must ask for what we need. And we have to balance our lives and practice self-care, whatever that looks like to you. I can't tell you how many times I've Googled what is self-care. Now, give me a thumbs up if you've Googled it as well. But I think it varies from person to person. That might be a hot bath for some people. That might be walking outside with your family for others. I looked out this window and saw so many people out here with their dogs and dads with the baby strollers. And I'm like, look at those people living their lives, And so it's self-care, whatever that looks like to you. For me, that is getting out the house. That is getting some fresh air. I tend to be very active. I'm not a restful person. Some of us EdTech people aren't. But we have to find rest where we can and just balance and take advantage of the resources that are available to us.
I think that is so crucial. We oftentimes put everyone else before us, especially as educators, our students, our fellow staff. The work that we do, it becomes priority number one.
Yes.
And we forget about the fact that if our cup is not full, we cannot
Yes.
pour into others. And we have
Exactly.
to take that time to fill up that cup.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Definitely. I'm really big on that airplane mask metaphor and analogy. I use it all the time. I'm a caregiver for a family member, and several of my coworkers are. And I'm like, y'all, you got to put that mask on for yourself, because again, same cup metaphor, if you are not awake, lucid, and capable, you're not going to be able to help anyone else.
Exactly. Al, I see you nodding along. I feel like you've got some thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's great listening to the thoughts from Adam and Rosalind. I think top of my list would be to get that iBook off Adam's shelf. That would do my well-being loads of good there. I see he's got that nice one there on his display. On a serious note, what they've said, I absolutely embrace. I think there is an onus on school leadership at the broadest level to recognise that when we're investing, whilst we're always naturally persuaded to invest in things that will have a direct correlation on student outcomes, because that's how we're measured for our success. Sadly, the things that most of us care about in terms of student outcomes aren't always the things that are measured. So thinking about tools that foster better communication for staff, that's really important for well-being, to actually have the right tools and support in place, to actually prioritise. We talked about the learning loss, or catch up as it gets called in the UK, and another term that's not popular when it comes to telling young people that they've lost something and they've got to catch up, is never a good starting point. But so actually, where's the priority? Well, the priorities often has been some of the things we can do proactively is those experiential activities that we do, thinking more about promotion of more of the arts and the drama and sports and other activities that foster different values. I think are really important right now in building our children's social emotional health and their resilience, because to be in the right place to learn, you've got to start with the building blocks for confidence. I think we've learned that some of the tools we talked about for remote learning, good, bad, or ugly as they were, for some of those, we've learned some lessons about how they can provide structure and routine for some of our more vulnerable learners, having that face-to-face reassurance. So there's some work to be done there. Techie's been doing well for things like digital signage for embracing and celebrating student success, not worrying about the school lunch menu, but actually focusing on celebrating what they're doing well, the art, the successes. Let's not paint the negative picture to those that we want to inspire to move forwards. So I think there's a lot of that. I think there's some really key points that did resonate as well, which is the biggest pressure that we've seen on staff, and it is a big issue for schools because of the amazing talent that's being lost from the profession, is one, that expectation that somehow they'll find time. So when we talk about professional development, it shouldn't be that schools say, well, here's all the resources you can access, without providing the time, the recognition that you can't keep putting more into the expectations of workload. So for some schools and districts, certainly it's provide the resources, provide the professional development, but also provide the cover so that it can be done within the working day. Facilitating support, those groups, building those emotional relationships with peers. I'm a big fan of my PLN that allows me not only to find information quickly, but you do actually get peer support and that emotional sharing of the challenges you're dealing with. You're not alone. You're not the only one who's encountered this particular challenge. So I think encouraging those kind of things. But the most valuable commodity I think any school can provide right now for staff is time. That's the number one thing for me. And leave it to the individual to decide how that time is best used.
Free time for everybody. It's not just a thing for kiddos. There needs to be a recess for teachers as well, so I can get stuff done and actually take a breather. Novel idea, but we do need that more now than ever. I think you're right, Al, that it's so important that teachers feel like not only that they have resources, but they have the time to actually access those resources and get to them. And one of the key things you mentioned was community and surrounding yourself with people and having people to kind of have sounding boards and talk about what's going on and really feel like you're not alone. Because I think a lot of us got disconnected in the last few years. And so I think now's a great time to, just as we're wrapping everything up, one of the biggest events for that kind of EdTech community is coming up here in about a week. It's the FETC Future of EdTech Conference taking place in Orlando, Florida next week. And you three are not only going to be there, you are going to be speaking at the conference. So take a minute and just tell us, what are you talking about? When can we catch you live? How can we hear all these fabulous tricks and tips that you're going to share with us about the EdTech world and what we need to do moving forward? Adam?
Well, you know what? Let me just say this. I'm happy that to be in person for events after so long. I've done a few in person events, and it's good because one thing that goes without saying with a lot of these conferences, yes, the sessions are great, but also seeing your PLN, as Al mentioned earlier, because a lot of I wouldn't be the educator I am today without the people that I've had a chance to meet through these various conferences and really grow. One of my good friends, Carl Hooker, we do a podcast through Future Ready Schools, and we're getting the chance to produce some presentations at FETC this year. So I'm really excited to be in person and doing that. One of the ones that I'm doing, I'm featured on the Future of EdTech Educator track this year. And so one of the sessions that I'm doing is called From Consumers to Producers. It's on January 26th. It's really focusing on having students go from consuming content, of course, to then being content creators. And what does that mean for a classroom? What does that mean for a student? And kind of what Rosalind was talking about earlier. We're going to talk about some of the digital citizenship and aspects of that nature. A fun one called Nailed It. That's going to be happening on January 27th. If you're familiar with the Netflix show Nailed It, if you have not checked it out, check it out, and I'll kind of give you a lead on what we're going to be doing with this show. It's really about failure and risk taking in the classroom because often we want students to do something on the fly, and we need to try to do some things on the fly ourselves and make mistakes and have products that aren't perfect. So the students understand what that looks like. And one that we do, another session on the 27th that I have is Powered by What You See, which is using cameras in the classroom or recording video to really break down your instruction and really grow from that. Really, when we look at sports, everybody records video of their game footage and they look at how can they get better at what they do. So really using a rubric and a strategy behind breaking down that video footage. And speaking of video, my last one I'm doing on the 28th is movie making in the classroom, no cameras needed. So really focusing on, once again, student creation from archive content that teachers create and really going through that whole process on how students can become content creators and sharing that to a global audience.
That is awesome. You are going to be so busy. That is a lot. That is a lot of sessions. But
like and also doing some podcast recording too.
Oh my gosh, Adam! So we talked about giving yourself some time. I'm going to need to take Mr. Kingsley's advice here and give yourself a wee little break somewhere in between. Go do something fun. Go. I don't know. Check out Disney World or something while you're there. And then Rosalind, you got some really exciting speeches, goodness, really exciting presentations coming up too. Give us a little preview of what to expect.
Well, I don't want to leave my PLN out as well. I'm really excited to be back in person. Our Georgia EdTech conference was in person back in November, and it was a great time. I'm looking forward to getting together with my FlowCab certified educators, book creator, Discovery Ed, Google, all of those folk, and just talking about tech. I'm excited to be a featured speaker in the Future of Library Media Services track. And so on Tuesday, you can catch me as we dialogue and discuss accessing diverse content and building out diverse experiences for our learners. Can't wait to talk about copyright. Got copyright? And how we can understand some basic elements of copyright law and how that applies to education, and then accessing lots of great stuff copyright free and in the correct manner, and how we can model that for our students, because that is really essential, because 21st century learners should know how to access things within copyright. Then on Wednesday, go right into Strong Start with internet safety, and how we can start at the beginning, put the first things first, and some tips and tricks and script and strategies, again, dialoguing and discussing some of that. And then also on Thursday, virtual celebrations. We still have a lot to celebrate, and some of it has to happen virtually, but these are also tools that you could use face-to-face in the classroom. So it's virtual celebrations, graduations, and meaningful downtime. So really, really excited about that. That's a fun one. And then lastly, getting graphic with graphic novels. Teaching with graphic novels and allowing our students to create graphic novels. So again, so much content is consumed by our students, but they are also eager to be content creators. And so that's what we see with the TikTok craze and all of that. So just a few tools to empower, excite, and engage our learners.
I love it. I love that you can go to Adam for consumers to producers, and then you can jump over to you, Rosalind, and learn about actually getting in there and making those graphic novels, which my little English teacher heart is loving the idea of our students actually creating something in stories and building them from themselves. So sounds like it's going to be an amazing time.
It is.
And this is Al's first year speaking at FETC. So tell us what you got going on, Al.
Well, now I've got my week full because I'm going to see Rosalind and Adam. So that takes up most of the week just by their sessions. No, I'm really excited. It's many years since I had the pleasure of being down at FETC, and it's lovely to come and speak this year. So I'm not doing lots of different sessions. I've got a session on the Friday, last day of the FETC at 11 o'clock in the morning. And not surprising, given one of my passions, I'm going to be talking about how to develop your digital strategy, the kind of planning, the process, and practical advice, really sharing best practice from around the world in different places and how that kind of shapes together. I'm always a fan of not giving the answers, but actually highlighting the questions that you need to ask so that you can make decisions that are right for you. So I'm really looking forward to that. And on the Wednesday, along with a number of other fools who've also taken the time out to write a book, I shall be doing a Meet the Author session, which is a chance to either say you like the book or to come and find out the idiot that wrote it, depending on your point of view. But I'm really looking forward to that. I think, as Adam and Rosalind have shared, I think the most important thing is it's just nice to be back face to face, meeting people that for the last couple of years you've been exchanging in a digital sense, and it's just so nice to share ideas, experiences, things you want to see and learn. And that's what FETC, like many of the best shows, are about. It's just a place to go with an open mind and learn lots. And that's what I intend to do.
We are very excited to have you all in person and, of course, to be there as well. I'll be jumping on booth 402 for Net Support, hopefully hosting some impromptu Net Support radio sessions and talking to some EdTechies and educators and learning from their mistakes and what's been going well to provide some tips and tricks for our educators. So feel free to pop on by and say hi to me on your way to go check out Adam or Rosalind or Al at one of their sessions. But now I think it's time to wrap this up and say thanks to you guys just for joining us, for sharing your insight and your thoughts into what we can really do to kind of make this year and years, going forward even better, to learn from what's happened in the past and to really catapult from that and help our students and our staff to make the most of what has been a challenging couple of years. So thank you, Adam. Thank you, Rosalind. Thank you, Al, for being on Net Support Radio. And I'll catch you guys live at FETC next week.
Safe travels, folks. See you there.
Yes, see you
Thanks,
then.
everybody.
Thank you.